the day they ultimately decide to move on from Wes Unseld Jr. as their head coach. One thing that's worth noting that it wasn't in the part of the press conference we were able to air for you live, but it was addressed what Wes Unseld's role will be, and it essentially will be whatever Wes wants it to be. They'll have those discussions over the next couple of days. They have to pay Unseld, so they probably will be like, dude, we value your opinion. We really like you personally. You've been a part of these conversations that all led us to the point that we said this wasn't the right role for you moving forward. So we still want to be able to pick your brain. But I also think there is a reality that perhaps they just part ways. And maybe he's around the rest of the year and they give him a call every once in a while. And he largely just gets to collect his check and sit at home and wait for next season when he'll be a very coveted assistant around the league. But there is like, if you were the head coach and now you're advising, like, what are you advising on? Maybe it's player personnel stuff. Who knows? So we'll see ultimately what that looks like for Wes Unseld. But the reason that Wes Unseld Jr. is no longer the head coach was because the Washington Wizards were not a competitive basketball team. And this goes far beyond, but is reflected in the 7-36 record that they have and the 77-130 record that he had as head coach. Ava Wallace joined us earlier in the program, and this was before Winger and Dawkins spoke at 5 p.m., but she hinted at exactly why Wes Unseld was likely being removed, and something that we'd hear confirmed from the horse's mouth, if you will, or the horse's mouths a short while later. But here was Ava.
Yeah, I think that's also a good kind of central question. And the thing that I kind of have landed on it in my mind and just talking to people this morning is that this is kind of the flexibility you're afforded when you're at square -1 of a rebuild. I think you could go two ways with this, honestly, where you say, okay, well, winning and losing weren't supposed to matter, so why all of a sudden do they matter? I don't think it's necessarily the record that has wrangled a lot of people, although that certainly plays a lot into this, definitely. But it's just the fact that, like you said, it's they're not competing. It's not games like last night that got Wes Unseld Jr. relocated, as you said, where they actually do pretty well against the Timberwolves. And it's like, okay, well, you're not going to overcome 21 turnovers. It's the fact that they were just getting blown out. And I don't know if it's necessarily, I do think what I went back to is like, they don't have their big, strong number one guy. Like Kyle Kuzma is doing his best right now. He doesn't have a ton of help. But these players don't hold themselves or don't account for each other's weaknesses on defense the way that they can show they have on offense. That's something that's missing, where you're going to see individual growth and maybe guys not playing together as a team or understanding how to play team defense, coupled with the fact that like they're in a place in this organization's rebuild where they can say, hey, let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And I don't necessarily know if Michael Winger is being that casual about this, but I do think there's kind of that's kind of the methodology of this is working, this is working, this is working. Okay, so what haven't we tried yet? Maybe someone at the top needs to go. I think that's kind of what you're seeing here, and the flexibility they're being afforded in the status they are as an organization right now.
Ava Wallace from the Washington Post with us earlier. And then, when you get into the press conference, you start to hear directly from Michael Winger and Will Dawkins. I thought this answer from Will Dawkins was pretty telling on kind of that end part of Ava's answer. Like the competitiveness, the amount of times they've just been blown out was obviously a huge reason why they decided to make this move from Wes Unseld. But Michael Winger talked about how they need to try some different stuff. And he doesn't use the word stale, but it felt like things had staled in a way that was no longer a part of the mission 43 games into that year one, or as Ava put it, year -1 of this rebuild.
We've talked about when we talked about coming in and assessing where we're out and evaluating, we're evaluating the process, not necessarily outcomes of how things happen. And when you have those conversations every single day, you can see when they're starting to fray or not necessarily adding up. And our dialogue with our players, our dialogue with our staff, head coach, front office, like it's pretty strong here. And that's the culture that Michael wanted when we got here. And I think when you have honest conversations, you reflect and sit down and you can realize that where's the process going? How do we get it back on track? And we have almost half the season left. I think there's 39 games starting with tonight. That's a lot of time to impact change and give us momentum into the next season. So we don't take that for granted, but we also were intentional and didn't want to rush a decision. We wanted to really give Wes a chance and get to this point, and that's where we're at.
That, I think, is great phrasing, and there's another phrase that Dawkins used in another answer that I thought was the quote of the presser, which is, this is a season of discovery. This is a season where they want to try and tinker with things, and they got to a point where they want to try different schemes defensively, because obviously what they're doing defensively is, the word unacceptable was used. Like, there was the level of brutal honesty in this press conference that I really appreciated, and we'll wrap up with that when it comes to the players in just a moment. But the phrase season of discovery, and then hearing the phrase like unacceptable defense on certain nights, tells you like, nah, like we can't. We're willing to deal with a lot, but not this. And so whether it's the rotations, whether it is a wanting to try some different things, different lineup combinations, different players starting, not starting, playing big minutes, closing games, different guys in different roles. Like, do you want Koulibaly on the ball more? Like, there's all these different things that you both want to tinker with, but also you need to, as Dawkins said at the end there, you don't want to rush. You want to give any new tweak that you make a chance to succeed. You can't be so all over the map that nothing has a chance to work through some initial growing pains and problems and ultimately implement itself as a good part of what you keep moving forward. But you do, in a mode that they're in right now, you do need to be willing to fail fast and understand what is just a sunk cost and not worth it. And it seems like these guys have a really good feel for that. And last but not least, this question by Josh Robbins led to one of the most honest and I think refreshing answers I have heard from a front office executive in a long, long time.
If you're evaluating competitiveness and spirit, how much of the responsibility for that not measuring up so far is on the players? Don't
A
those
lot. And they know it, Josh. I mean, these are conversations we have with them. They know it. We met with them today. There's not a single player in that locker room happy with this outcome. Every single one of them raised their hand as, when the question was asked, who in this room is responsible for this? Every single player raised their hand. They know it.
That had big dad energy. Big disappointed dad energy. Big like, oh, they messed up and they know it. I don't need to punish them. They put themselves in timeout. That's the kind of team you want. Apparently, it's a great locker room. You just hear on the record, off the record, that locker room is tight, it's good, it's healthy, but you got to keep it that way. And it's got to mesh with the coach. And even if they like the coach personally, I mean, this was the Commanders' issue in a lot of ways. It was 53 deep. Did they love Rivera? No. Was there a lot of dudes were pretty vocal about how much they liked Rivera? Yeah. But they didn't play hard enough for him, and there wasn't an accountability. And so ultimately, these two men, just for some different reasons, some similar reasons, suffer the same fate. And that is another coaching change in Washington. Wes Unseld out today.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.